I was surfing through social media a couple of days ago, and I saw a very short video that someone posted of the airport in Singapore. He has a little video, and he says, "I'm just in awe of Singapore's airport." And you see this magnificent airport with a giant waterfall in the center of it. And it reminded me of airports I've seen over the years, recent years, like the airport in Seoul, South Korea, another spectacular airport, which, by the way, has beautiful facilities, top-notch restaurants. You can have salons, all in the airport itself. And it occurred to me, wow, Americans probably don't know this, but foreign airports today are much better than American airports. You look at places like JFK, which looks like some rundown second or almost third world airport, and the Bombay airport, which used to be a third world airport. You'd actually have to walk on dirt to get to the gate, is now a spectacular, polished floors, beautiful airport. Now, I'm not really here to talk about airports. I'm raising a bigger question, which is America in terminal decline? Now, I remember that when Reagan gave speeches, he frequently would say, in his typical optimistic fashion, our best days are still ahead. Even when Reagan wrote his very touching letter about having Alzheimer's, it ends with, I'm convinced that America's best days are ahead. But I think for Reagan, this was not a prediction so much as it was kind of a hope that America would hold on to the things that made America special and made America great. Remember, civilizations don't last forever. Here's Edward Gibbon, the historian. It was at Rome on the 15th of October, 1764, as I sat musing among the ruins of the Capitol, while the barefoot friars were singing vespers in the temple of Jupiter, that the idea of writing the decline and fall of the city first started to my mind. This is when Gibbon gets the idea for writing his great work, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire, having fallen, has never returned. And when we think back, for example, to countries that have dominated the world, by the way, in the 15th and early 16th century, the dominant power was the Portuguese. In the 16th and 17th century, it was the Spanish. In the 17th and early 18th century, it was the French. In the 18th and early 19th century, it was England. And then from the 19th century, the late 19th century, through the 20th century, it's been America. But here we are in the 21st century, and it seems to be that America is losing something permanently. And we have to remember that countries that lose that top position, historically, to my knowledge, never get it back. So this is a permanent loss. And I notice it in all kinds of ways. I notice it, for example, look at, foreigners used to love to come to America. And they'd love to come to America because they'd love to go to San Francisco. Imagine wanting to go to San Francisco today. Who does? They'd love to go to New York because New York was the hippest, the coolest, the most modern city in the world. But today, New York City is unattractive. And I say this as someone who lived there, someone who recently visited New York for Christmas. It's not that New York doesn't have nice things, but other cities are much better. A friend of ours just came back a few weeks ago from Lucerne, Switzerland. He goes, you won't believe the standard of cleanliness, the efficiency, everything works, everything is hyper modern. It kind of puts New York City completely to shame. New Orleans, Debbie and I were in New Orleans a couple of years ago. We have such a romantic idea of New Orleans. But today, New Orleans, it's like you have to look down at your feet because you could be sort of walking in human excrement. It's just absolutely disgusting. And so we left New Orleans by basically resolved. I don't think if we're permanently resolved, but we don't really feel like going back. There are cities that you'd never think of, like Dubai and Istanbul, that today are cooler, more hip, better amenities, more cultural facilities, a better vibe, certainly more safe, new buildings going up all the time. When was the time they built a new skyscraper in New York? Well, it may seem again that I'm only talking about cities. No, I'm talking about a country in which our cities are now dilapidated, our how rural areas have been in many ways decimated because a lot of the jobs have gone abroad. And so people are pressured to leave these rural areas. So what does that leave? The suburbs. And the Biden administration is declaring a kind of war in some respects against the suburbs, trying to force the suburbs to have diversity in their housing patterns, build new forms of low income housing and so on. So they're in a word, they're coming for the suburbs. And that's kind of all that's left. So we have a country now, you've got a super rich and elite that's degenerate. You've got a middle class that's been somewhat hollowed out. And then you've got a poor class, a lot of it an ethnic poor, but also a white poor that is dependent, that is living on a paltry living, that is often has a cultural breakdown, family breakdown. So this is today's America. And it's an America that, it seems to me, is losing its exceptionalism and losing some of the guardrails that secured our society in the past. We're working to fight against all this. We're working to reverse the disasters that are being perpetrated by the left, and the disasters are coming from the left, but too often our own side just stands around, stands by the wayside, so to speak, watches these things happen, and lets them happen.